Hey everybody, my name is McDonald, and today let's see if it's actually worth it to buy a house with what's going on in the market. Right now, houses are selling for 103% of list price, which means that if you buy a $400,000 home, you can expect to pay $412,000. That means you're going to be paying $12,000 over asking price. Now, that works a couple different ways. When you buy a house, whoever you're borrowing the money from, the lender, they send out a professional appraiser to go look at the property and see what it's worth. They take properties from around that house that have recently sold, called comps, and they then apply that to the property you're trying to buy to figure out how much it is worth. Because the bank only wants to lend money for what the property is worth. Whatever you're going to tell that seller you will pay over what it appraises needs to come out of your pocket. So let's say the list price is $400,000. The appraiser comes out and says, yes, this house is worth $400,000, but you offered $412,000. That $12,000 difference over the appraisal will need to be paid for out of the buyer's pocket. So is it worth it to even buy a house right now with everything that's going on? First, why are homes even selling for so much over asking price? What's going on in the market? Well, if we look back a year, you can see we have 900 active listings per month available. And if we look at what's available right now, you can see this trend line. The available inventory to buy has gone down and down and down across the entire last year. And we're sitting at about 500 homes available at any given time in our current market. That means there's almost half as many homes for sale, but there's also a ton of people who want to buy them. Most houses are going under multiple offers and hitting a bidding war where people are trying to outcompete each other to get the house. But why is everyone trying to buy a home right now? One of the key reasons is that interest rates are so low. What does that even mean? Why does interest rates being low mean you should buy a house right now? You can see 2 years ago, in 2019, interest rates were at 4.06, 4.12, let's just call it 4%. In 2019, interest rates were at 4%. Right now, today, interest rates are sitting around 3%. That's 1 percentage point less, which means that when you go to the bank to borrow money to buy your house, it will actually cost you less money to pay back the bank. Let me show you. So if you bought a house with a 3% interest rate, a $400,000 home, versus a 3.8% interest rate, within the first 5 years, you would save $15,000, which means you will be paying back $15,000 less. It costs you $15,000 less over 5 years, because when you're paying your mortgage payment, the first few years, something like 75% of your payment isn't actually going to pay off your house. It's going to the bank as interest because they allowed you to borrow that money. So they stack those interest payments up front, so that way if you default or anything happens, they've recouped their money. So they charge you most of that interest up front. With that lower interest rate, it means that there's less money going to the bank and you're going to be paying off more money towards your mortgage. And over the course of 30 years, with just that 0.8% interest rate difference, you would be saving $63,000 in interest payments. And now if we go back up to 4.3, you can see in the first 5 years, you would save $24,000. And across a 30-year mortgage, you would save $100,000. Which means, in theory, if you buy a house and you stay in it for 30 years to pay off your mortgage, you could actually afford $100,000 more of a home with a 3% interest rate versus a 4% interest rate. So because of COVID, a lot of people don't want strangers coming into their house right now. So total listings are really low. But because of COVID, interest rates are extremely low because the government is trying to incentivize people to spend money and not hoard it. So interest rates are low, but inventory is low, which is causing everyone who wants to buy to start fighting over the few houses that are actually for sale. So is it worth it for you to buy right now? If you're going to be staying in your house for 1 to 2 years, I would say probably not, because you're not going to really take advantage of the low interest rate. You're going to just be paying a standard mortgage. But if you're going to be staying in for 5 years or more, then you will start to see significant savings on your interest. Like I just showed you, you could save $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 in interest in the first 5 years, which means that that $12,000 over asking price that you paid for out of pocket, you've actually recuperated by not paying that as interest to the bank. So if you're going to buy a house and your goal is to stay in it for a year, maybe 2, maybe you're going to move to a new area, or you're not sure what's going to happen after that, it's probably not worth it to buy. I would recommend renting. But if you're going to buy a house and this is going to be a 5-year or more place you're going to live, buying a house now with these really low interest rates is still a great option. The other thing that I keep seeing popping up is, what about the crash? What's going to happen when this housing market crashes? This has to be a bubble, right? Honestly, I don't think it's going to crash. In 2008, when that crash happened, it was because banks were basically giving out free money to anyone who asked. You could walk in, you could say, I make $1 million a year. The bank would say, sounds good to me, here's some money. They didn't actually verify that. Right now, lending requirements are still very strict, which means that they're verifying that people can afford to pay what they are lending them. So as people become more comfortable with the vaccine and having strangers come into their house again, more people are going to start to list their houses, which will cause this to start to level out. We might see a slight price drop, but I don't think we're going to see a full crash, because the people who are getting mortgages now, a lot of them cash reserves, conventional offers, cash in bank, because they're having to pay that over appraisal value, that extra $12,000 out of pocket cash, which means that even if housing prices dip a little, they're not going to be underwater on their mortgage, that they're still going to be able to afford these payments. The banks have verified that. So although we might see a slight dip in prices, we're probably going to see interest rates rise up too, which means that that extra money you would be saving and not paying back to the bank, or you're going to start to pay extra interest to the bank, even though houses prices are down a little bit more. So it kind of might even out. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to see a huge price drop. I think this is going to be the new normal. And I think that as we continue on for the years, if you're doing a 5-year more stay in this house, it's worth it to buy right now.